This looked like a scene from The Walking Dead. And this is not just in Philadelphia, it's happening throughout the nation. We're seeing in major cities such as Los Angeles, Portland, Chicago, New York City, Houston, Atlanta, and many other cities out there. And some of these drugs is very powerful because the American are known to using traditional drugs such as marijuana, cocaine, heroin, and even meth. But now you have fentanyl as the new drug. And there was a new drug that I heard. It's called Trank. And Trank is a tranquilizer that they use on horses that people are basically injecting themselves with. And it will basically eat up a part of their body where if they don't get treated, they could potentially lose their limb or it has to be amputated. And fentanyl allegedly it's a drug that the government's saying that's coming from China, and the Chinese government will send that drug to Mexico, where the cartel will basically funnel it inside the United States, and it's causing a lot of damage. So some of these zombie drug is having a huge impact on the U.S. population because let's just be honest, drug has been a huge problem in the U.S. society for years. And even way before the war on drug that was announced by the government in the early 90s and even late 80s, which it devastated a huge portion of the black community, especially the fathers, where a lot of black men ended up going to the prison because of the laws and the policy that was set in place when it comes to the war on drug. Because some policy, for example, they made it so if you're caught with, for example, a gram of cocaine, you will do less charges compared to if you're found with the gram of crack, because cocaine was the drug of choice for a lot of rich white people, and crack was a drug of choice for a lot of middle class and even poor black American. And this had an impact on the families in the black communities where a lot of fathers were basically locked up because they could not find jobs. And now they were resorting to selling marijuana, selling drugs. And nowadays, a lot of state now has legalized marijuana. So many people that are serving time in prison for marijuana in many of those states, I think they should get basically released or their charges should get dropped. But that's another topic for another day. But so far, this new drug, fentanyl, has had an impact in so many cities in America, in so many people's life. And now this zombie drug that we're seeing, a lot of people are becoming like zombie. I kind of feel bad for them. But at the same time, a lot of it has to do with their own decision that they're making. Because as an adult, you are responsible and accountable for the decision that you make. You are responsible and accountable for the things that you inject in your body and the thing that you consume. Because most of these young people here that you see that are using drug, some of them are never looking at the label. Some of them are, mixing their drug with multiple other things. Because I remember when I was growing up, there was a program called DARE, DARE, and it stands for Drug Abuse Resistance Education. And I remember it was a bunch of police officers that was coming into elementary school, middle school, and even high school to teach kids about not to use drugs, because drug could potentially become harmful to your body and it could potentially lead you to prison and even end up getting killed. And I remember police officers were coming into our school, talking to us from middle school, high school, and even in elementary school. So when I was growing up, I wasn't really a big fan of drugs. I only used drugs such as pharmaceutical drug. And I did smoke marijuana a couple of times with my friends, but I never really was a huge drug user. But nowadays, programs such as DARE has basically disappeared. That's why I asked the question, how did America get to this point? Because if those programs still exist, I hope it does. I hope the government or even the federal government is still funding those type of programs. It will prevent a lot of young people from basically becoming like a bunch of people from the scene from The Walking Dead. That's just my opinion. Because some of these people who are in this situation, some of them are very young individuals because they trusted a friend, because they trusted a loved one, because they wanted to fit in the utilized drug that they probably did not know no information about. And some of their friends probably laced marijuana with different type of drug, and then now they're addicted. Because addiction is a very powerful thing. And addiction, in my opinion, the only way that you can really fight addiction is you got to fight it from within. You got to do it yourself, because you can go to rehab, you can go to therapy, but if you're not a person who's very driven, a person who has a strong will, it's very hard for you to fight addiction. We are human. We all have addiction. There's good addiction, and then you got bad addiction. Because there's some people who are addicted to success. There are some people who are addicted to making money. There are some people who are addicted to basically having their own self-image being portrayed in a positive light. There's certain people who are addicted to just being the center of attention. And then you have people who are addicted to drugs. And then you have people who are addicted to alcohol. And then you have people who are addicted to sex. And then you have people who are addicted to pornography. And you have people who are addicted to multiple things that could potentially lead them in a harmful way. So addiction is a battle that every human being has to fight. And they have to fight it from within. This is why I think it's very important for you as an individual to actually know who you are and what you're capable of doing. Because we have a lot of people who are grown, adult, who doesn't know who they are. They don't know the capacity that they have. They don't know what they're capable of doing with themselves or how far they can push themselves. Because if you understand that concept, if you understand that process of knowing who you are, how far you can go in life, how much you're willing to push, how driven you are, you will be able to beat most of these addictions, especially the negative addiction that you have in your life, which a lot of people don't have the strength to do. And for me, looking at these people, I think most of it has to do with them making decision in their life. All of it had to do with the decision that they made in their life, and this is the result of it. And I do feel bad for them. I hope they get help, but at the same time, you got to make wise decisions to be able to get out of this type of situation. You got to make wise decisions to make sure that you are not put in this situation the long term, because the things that you do today could potentially lead you in the wrong path. Because the things that you do today could potentially lead you in a position where, you're basically homeless. Now you have to utilize drug, because some of these people, yes, life is hard. Life is difficult. Everybody get affected by life. Everybody get their ass beat by life. But you just got to know how to cope with some of these problems. And some people will utilize drug as a coping mechanism to get away from the problem that they're going through. And some people will utilize family member. Some people will utilize therapy. Some people will utilize going to the gym. Some people will utilize alcohol to cope with their problem. But whatever coping mechanism that you use, I think you just got to be smart and you got to be aware of what you're doing. Because if you cope with an addiction that could potentially lead you to the wrong path, it would definitely devastate your life. And now you will have to fight many battles, many demons, many problems that you will have to face just to become a normal person in society. And this is the issue that we're seeing throughout American society. Yes, the economy is playing a huge role because a lot of people are basically unemployed. They're underemployed. Some of them are not making sufficient amount of money compared to the debt and the loan and the obligation and the bills that they have. And it's adding stress upon their life. And many of them will probably just say, you know what, screw it. Let me just live life as it is and utilize a different coping mechanism, which is drug. But I'm making this video so people can just know, there's other ways, especially if you're going through a lot in your life, because drug is not the solution. I think you can utilize a lot of resource. You can utilize therapy. You can utilize rehab. You can utilize your family members. You can utilize people around you who are supportive to be able to help you cope with the problem that you're going through. Because if you can't find a coping mechanism, you will end up being in the streets like these individuals here who are addicted, highly addicted to drugs that they don't know nothing about, such as fentanyl and many other drugs that's out there in the market, in the streets that people are selling just to make a buck. Let me know what you think in the comment. If you're new to this channel, please make sure you like, you share, you subscribe. Till next time.